Do it again, do it again.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Other People Podcast. Thank you for joining us once again. If you are at all, that's always nice. I am Jordan Royter. With me as always, of course, is my co-host and good friend, Andy Bean.
What's up?
And we're going to talk about something a little bit different. This has been a long time coming. I thought we would just go on down nostalgia lane and talk at as much length as we can about fighting games and kind of the fighting game history, not down to a technical level because we are not experts. We are fans, but we are certainly not experts.
Clear. We are not experts. We are just fans.
No.
We don't know any of these types of things. We play them for fun, not to make money.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly never competed in tournaments or anything. I would never even consider playing in any sort of a tournament.
Yeah, at least not professional tournaments. Like group of friends style tournaments, yes.
Yeah. And I'm sure I would still get my ass handed to me because it happens all the time. And, and so...
I probably would now, too, because I haven't had anybody to play with for a while.
Me too. And, the whole fighting game genre, has certainly changed quite a bit. There are still, the fairly traditional fighting games that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of them, but they have become very fast-paced, very technical, and almost kind of hard to follow at times, too.
Yeah.
And
a little cheap at times, too.
Well, fighting games have always kind of been like that.
They've gotten a little worse over the years, though.
Yeah, kind of, but not to such a ridiculous extent. But they are there.
Yeah.
So I thought it would take us all the way back. Now, if you want to get really technical, now I don't even remember if this was the very first fighting game that I ever played, but there, of course, was Karate Champ on the PC. But
and a little on Nintendo as well. I remember, I think, renting that once.
Hold on. All right, I'm sorry. You were saying?
Yeah, it was on the original Nintendo, because I remember renting it once.
Mm-hmm. I never played it on the Nintendo. I understand the Nintendo port is not very good. But
I got no reference because I never played the PC port. So.
yeah, and I I vaguely remember playing it. I couldn't really even tell you, how well the controls were or anything like that. I do imagine that by today's standards, it's probably very clunky and pretty broken.
Yeah, probably.
But really, the very first fighting game, that really just sticks out in my mind is the very first one that I ever played, never saw in the arcade was, of course, Street Fighter 2.
Yep, me too.
And, and I remember playing that originally, in the arcade with my buddy Matt, when I was a kid. And, and not having any idea on how to do the moves. And then, seeing these other guys, step in and play, and they, knew how to do the moves. And being a kid, I actually asked, hey, can you teach me how to do that? No.
Go away, kid. You bother us.
Besides, man, can't you see, that we're real gaming professionals and shit like that? It's well, good for you, jackass. And then, of course, when we got the Super Nintendo and stuff like that, we got, the home versions, and that was really the very first feel of being able to, play an arcade game in your home.
Yeah, and instruction book that had the move list.
Yeah.
So you could actually practice this stuff.
Well, that was if you bought it. If you rented it, then you didn't even get a booklet.
Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't.
Yeah.
It kind of depends.
Yeah, because I remember, God, fuck, man, you want to go down, real nostalgia lane, hanging out at night, with your buddy, you're playing a fighting game, and you're trying to figure out all the moves, and then you write down exactly how you did the move, and stuff like that. Yeah, I remember doing that, both, with Street Fighter and Weapon Lord, Mortal Kombat, all those fighting games back then. It was...
And surprisingly, a lot, especially in the early days in the 90s, a lot of the moves actually kind of translate from game to game.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least how you did them, anyway.
Yeah, very much so. The only complaint that I ever had, and this was later on after, so many years, of playing console games and stuff like that. I mean, I do still have this kind of weird transition where I prefer, the gamepad, in order to, do my moves and to control my character as opposed to, the joystick.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because it just doesn't feel, accurate enough, as part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so, naturally, that was very much, a big part of our lives. And, yeah, I mean, we could talk about the whole Street Fighter series, but, I mean...
Yeah, and
it's
how
pretty
it,
much the same thing, only...
How it, went on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, because, all that was added was that, in Turbo, you could finally play, as the boss characters. That, in the game was on speed. It was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course Super Street Fighter, which added, I think
it added
4 more characters.
Was it 4 more characters?
Right.
Let's see.
Because it was T-Hawk, DJ, the Bruce Lee character,
Cammy,
and I think that's it. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me.
I feel like there's another one, but I can't remember. Oh, yeah. I think there was, the Turbo Edition, they added Akuma. For the first time.
Oh,
the Turbo Edition of Super Street Fighter
Turbo
2.
I never played that
one,
I
didn't either, but...
Yeah. All right, so moving on to the next series, of course, we have, the sort of the game changer in a way, which was Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, the only thing that Mortal Kombat, kind of changed or really brought
was violence and blood.
Yeah. I do wonder, they were obviously not the first game to do, the whole digitized actors.
No,
sort of
but they certainly kind of did it.
Yeah. But they were the first one to be, so controversial and mainstream and popular enough that, hey, this game is overwhelmingly violent, and
senators actually tried to get video games banned.
Yeah. So much so that when the games came to home consoles, they were severely censored.
At least the Super Nintendo one was. I think the Sega Genesis wasn't.
The Sega Genesis was, but it had a special code that you could input to unlock the violence.
Ah, that's right.
But I remember... Actually, I don't remember if I ever really did later on play the Sega Genesis version, just to see that. Because I remember our buddy Sam, from one of his video game magazines, he found a Game Genie code that allowed you to unlock the quote-unquote violence for the Super Nintendo version.
Yeah, and basically all it turned was the sweat to red, so it looked like blood, but that was it.
Yeah, because, in, arcade version of Mortal Kombat, you punch somebody, gobs of blood just spill out of them and just go everywhere. It's ridiculous. And, yeah, the only code that I remember being kind of cool was the Goro code, where you could play as Goro. But every time that we tried to do that, it would make the game crash.
Yep.
So it just wasn't worth doing. I mean, yeah, it was cool for a couple of minutes.
And then the game would crash.
Yeah, so it's just let's just not do that anymore. Yep. And then, of course, you had, Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 3. Mortal Kombat 2, of course, was the one that when it came to home consoles, they didn't censor it.
They did, put on one thing, this is, for adults only.
Yeah, because I think Mortal Kombat, and quite a lot of other games, too, were, of course, the invention of the video game rating system.
Yeah, which is totally fine.
Yeah. Well, it's a good step in the right direction as opposed to we need to ban these.
Yeah.
And no, that's just stupid.
Or I believe
And
like
that's
the
never gonna
latest things
happen.
like we need to only have them done in like adult only shops. So basically, we would have to get our video games at a porno shop.
Yes. No, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I think I heard
And
that somewhere.
no,
I may be misquoting something here. I am.
yeah.
Please forgive me.
That's all right. What I did think was funny at one point, and this is semi off topic, and this was, I remember, late into the video game lifespan, where I think this was during the 64 and PlayStation years. I just remember, going into Hastings, back when, when you could still rent, Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, which was still nice, but I just remember they had a couple of odd titles in the Nintendo section where it was strip poker in a game called Bubble Bath. And they were kind of adult, nudity games. And being a teen, I was kind of tempted to rent them. Though I'm pretty sure Mom would never let me rent a video game called Bubble Bath or Strip Poker.
No.
And well, yeah, I mean, for the time, it would have been like, wow, this is really erotic and really hot. Today, it'd be like, this is stupid. This is so stupid. I can't believe I spent $5 on this.
Yeah, but
or God knows how much, something like that, just goes for now. When in today's age, you can get free porn and free pictures on the internet. Right? Yeah, that's true. Hell, just go to Google search and just type in boobs. And you'll get, anything and everything you'd ever want. Anyway, but back on track. Actually, let me ask you something. When did you stop liking Mortal Kombat? Was it by 3?
Yeah. It was a little after free. I think I played free like a little bit, and then just kind of quit.
Yeah. I know that I liked and played 3, but I wasn't in love with it.
Yeah, me too. And then I did get back into it a little bit when you introduced Deadly Alliance to me, but
yeah.
And then kind of dropped off it again
'cause...
until the remake of it.
Yeah. Because God, speech impediment's getting really bad today. Because I did play quite a bit of 3. The one thing that really disappointed me about it was, of course, the fact that my favorite character, was no longer in it, and which was Scorpion. They did, of course, bring him back, and a whole bunch of characters for Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And I remember, of course, I played those, and then I think the one that I really do not like the most is Mortal Kombat 4.
Yeah, isn't that the one where they tried to make it 3D, but they did kind of a horrible job of it?
Well, I'm trying to remember, if that was still, the early days of 3D, because I think, other games, did that better.
Yeah.
But I just remember, I didn't like the character models. The game, well, hell, you go back to original, to the original series of Mortal Kombat, it's very clunky.
Yeah. And the kind of digital actors thing just doesn't really translate that well.
It's not so much that. It's the gameplay.
Well, yeah,
in
that
and of
too.
Itself. The gameplay of original Mortal Kombat is very clunky. And, to me, it doesn't allow for a whole lot of strategy, really. And, you can, get really cheap with it, though, with certain characters, obviously.
Yeah, like Scorpion's spear thing.
Well,
in the original.
But it's easy enough.
In the original,
Yeah.
that was...
Yeah. It is fairly easily for someone to be able to avoid it or block it or anything like that.
Yeah, if you're fighting a
anyway,
human opponent, but not so much for the computer.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, moving on. The only other ones that I have, which I didn't play a great deal of, but I did play them. There was, of course, the Virtua Fighter arcade, which I liked, but some of the character models, I still couldn't get behind, because it was still the semi-early days of 3D and stuff like that. Because they were so polygonal and everything, and and everything was all like sharp edges and everything. Well, what about you? Let's go off of you. What's a game for you?
There are some of the SNK fighters, like the King of Fighters series, and
of course,
whatnot. Let's see here.
How many of those do you think that you played? Did you play like just about all of them, or?
I think I played about like maybe 5 of them because they they did one every year.
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't mentioned Soul Calibur.
Of course. We will get to that, of course.
I don't know how well you know of the Fatal Fury series.
Oh yeah, I do. My brother and I, we played a little bit of the original arcade, and of course at the home port. The only thing that I remember that kind of disappointed me about Fatal Fury was that when you played it, you couldn't play as any of the other characters except for your 3 heroes.
Yeah, you could in the later ones, like by free. I think you could.
Yeah.
And then there was like the Art of Fighting, which was kind of a spin-off of Fatal Fury.
Was that before or was that after?
I think Fatal Fury came first, and then they did Art of Fighting, and then you just had 2 characters that you could play.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
You have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, do you?
No, I know. I know. It's very much part of that SNK franchise because it does very much have the SNK look and style and everything. That was just one other game that I saw in stores, but I never played. Because I was always very wary about trying to play something new. Because I couldn't help but think that, what if it sucks?
Yeah.
Because then I'm stuck with that thing all weekend.
Yeah, because that was back in the early days before we had online reviewers.
Yeah, and
you were kind of
and even
it was kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah. There was nothing worse, than renting, a game for your weekend and being forced to have to play it, and you realize that, oh god, this game sucks. Yeah, that's always the worst thing. And I got a game on here that I nearly forgot to add on here until I was going through the Wikipedia fighting game list, and I'm surprised that this is on there because especially when a popular series like Soul Calibur isn't on there for some reason.
That's weird.
But this one is, and it's mentioned as part of a series, even though, as I understand it, there's only 2 games from this series, and that is Rise of the Robots.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this game sucked.
Oh, yeah.
This game was a piece of crap. And how we were introduced to this...
that was a broken piece of shit.
Do you remember how we were introduced to this piece of shit, too?
Yeah, wasn't it Sam who introduced us to it?
I remember... okay, so this was back in middle school. Every once in a while, for a couple of Fridays or so, our teachers decided, hey, let's do something really fun. We will let you guys, bring in your gaming consoles, and for a couple of hours, you guys can play video games, but nothing violent. Which meant that, so we can't play any of our fun fighting games or anything like that.
Nothing too violent.
And Sam, yeah, and Sam, he was, trying to, find, a fighting game, that wasn't violent, but that, was something that we could play. It just turned out to be one of the worst fighters, that we could have played. But, I mean, we did still try to play it, but I just remember the first thing wrong with this is that if you do any sort of a versus play, player one has to play as the protagonist character, which is, the cyborg character. And then player two, he can play as anybody else or whatever. But the game is clunky. It's broken. It wasn't very fun.
And if you try to do any of the moves, it may work, it may not work. It was kind of a 50-50 chance it wouldn't work.
Yeah. Hell, I bought that game for like a couple of bucks, like a couple of years ago, and and sat down and replayed it, just to remember like how crappy is this game, because I remember it not being very good. And yeah, it's still a piece of shit. It's still a very broken piece of shit. In fact, somebody online did a Let's Play of one of the other versions. I suppose, like one of the better versions on like one of the PC models, where where the game looks nicer and maybe plays a little bit smoother, but was able to exploit a cheat where he just jump kicked every single enemy and was able to win every single time. With no problem.
Yep.
Which just goes to show how broken, this game was. The only thing that the game had for it that was, the game looked nice, but all the story beats and like everything else was cut, from the home versions, because it was too much, for them to handle. Was the fact that Brian May, the guitar player for Queen, did the music, and the music was awesome. That was the only good thing about that piece of shit, was that Brian May from Queen did the music, and the music was cool. That was it. But yeah, that was Rise of the Robots, and still a piece of shit. I heard that the sequel is better, though.
Don't know. I never played the sequel.
Yeah, well, if you play the first one and the first one sucks, would you really want to play the sequel?
Not really.
Yeah, I might, try to seek it out and, and actually play it someday. We'll see. Moving on, back to some of the other classics, of course. Well, I don't know how much of a classic Clay Fighter is considered, but it was at least fun. It does suffer from the same problem that like classic Mortal Kombat does, where a lot of the gameplay is very clunky and very slow.
Yeah.
At times.
But at least it had a good sense of humor to it, kind of.
Yeah. I think Clay Fighter 64, was about as good as it got, in terms of the wacky sense of humor and all the crazy characters and everything. Because part of the plot is there's this island, and there's this evil doctor, and Santa Claus is also there. Like Earthworm Jim was a playable character in it too, which was pretty cool. Yeah. And I haven't played that game though in a long time. Yeah, but I remember enjoying it at least. And of course, Killer Instinct.
Oh yeah.
Of course, I remember seeing that originally back in the arcade and being like, oh my god, what is this? This thing looks even better and more violent than Mortal Kombat, and and it was about the same level of violence. It was just the way that the game looked, and it played much faster and more smoothly than Mortal Kombat ever did.
Yeah.
So, and of course we got a home port of that, and of course the home port is not going to look as good as the original arcade. It was still a very playable and fun game.
Oh yeah. I remember playing many. I remember having many fun hours getting my ass kicked on that game at home.
Yeah. Obviously, the one big exploit about Killer Instinct is that if you've played it enough and really how to use the characters, you can just cheese the shit out of anybody.
Oh yeah,
with,
especially if you want to know
somebody's-
each character's ultimate combo. It's pretty easy to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember either Brett or Brandon, telling me about how, like, if we play Killer Instinct, you will hate us.
Yeah, and
Because they will,
sure enough,
just
we
cheese.
hated them.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they would
and-
they'd ultra combo us all the freaking time.
Yeah. Now, and to be honest, I never actually played a Killer Instinct with them. I just remember them, telling me that. at
Yeah,
one point.
I unfortunately did. And
Yeah.
I hated them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheap bastards.
That's to be expected. Okay, so of course, let's move on to... Now, this was my introduction, though I probably played the first, but I only played it once, and that was in the original arcade. But this did come much, much later, and I did play it a lot more later on. That, of course, was Soul Calibur 2.
Yeah.
And the most I played of it, really, I think, came from the re-release of it. When they
When they put it to the consoles and
well, yeah, but like when they sort of like remade it for the PS2 and GameCube and Xbox and stuff like that.
and each one like had a different character.
Yeah, PS2 had Heihachi from
Yeah.
Tekken. GameCube had Link, and of course Spawn had Xbox. Or
Xbox had Spawn.
Spawn was on Xbox.
You tried to say that backwards.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Version I went for was GameCube with Link. Because I had no idea who Heihachi was.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't
me
really
too.
give... I really didn't, care all that much about Spawn anymore at that point.
Yeah.
I do own, like both those versions, though. And actually, a while ago, they re-released an HD version of Soul Calibur 2, and it actually has both Heihachi and Spawn on it, but not Link.
Huh.
Obviously, because
Nintendo probably didn't want to.
Nintendo
release
would
Link.
not allow them
Yeah.
to do that. So it's like, yeah, we'll do that for the GameCube version, but we're not going to do that for your HD version.
Yeah.
So
Go fuck yourself.
yeah, which kind of sucks, but oh well. Because my favorite character from that, of course, was Necrid, which everybody hates. So, whatever. Fuck you.
Well, that's just because you were kind of cheap with him.
Well, and like from what I understand about Necrid, was that he was a very, I guess, unbalanced character, which is something that I understand a bit more about now with fighting games. Because there's always that character, like Akuma, who's very unbalanced.
Yeah.
Where they're very strong. And it's best if you're like always on the offensive. And never defensive with him.
Yeah, he tried to go defensive because they're very strong, but they can't take a hit very well.
Yeah. And it's probably also because of the fact too that like they have like such unusual moves and combos and stuff that they're, I guess, hard to predict or hard to defend against and such. But like, isn't that something that you want from a fighter? For your character to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
Hell, isn't that how you're gonna win if it's hard to predict your moves?
Yeah, but that's real. That's real world logic. That doesn't really apply to video game logic.
Well, then fuck you, then. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, one other game that really came into play for me, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, DOA 2.
Oh, yeah.
How I would just drive you nuts with, hey, high hit, low hit, mid, low, medium, high. Just to keep you just from countering me.
Yeah.
Every single time. And just driving you nuts. And God damn it, why can't I counter? Why can't I counter? This is bullshit. Fuck you.
Yeah, in case you guys haven't realized, I countered his shits a lot. He really hated me for it.
Yeah, and so later on, I would, just adopt the ability of, I'm just going to mix up every single one of my moves, and then that way you can never counter me. So,
Yeah.
and it worked, too, because it would get to a point where you would just get pissed off, angry at me, really bad,
Yeah. Gamer
really
rage!
bad, and it was almost to the point where like, should I let him win this next one so he doesn't get mad at me again? Yeah, but then it's like, well, I don't want to give him a pity win either, because that just might piss him off more.
So eventually we just kind of quit playing.
Yeah. Man, and on top of that, DOA 2 was introduced to me by you.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time I stupidly bought a PS2 when it first came out,
and there was no
and there
games
were not
for
a lot
it.
of good games out there. I mean, anything that was out sucked. I don't even remember like what was, a first rental title that I looked at that was at all good, because I rented maybe like a couple of games, a few times a week, and a lot of them were garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't even remember if and when I played. If and when I played Onimushu, and then later on, Ring of Red, and stuff like that, which probably came out later. Because primarily I wanted a PS2, because like Silent Hill 2 was coming out, and then Metal Gear Solid 2, but those didn't come out until like a year later after. And there was this one day where like we were at Blockbuster, and I was complaining about how like I didn't really have anything to play on my PS2, and you recommended, oh dude, check out this one, a DOA 2. I mean, it's a really good game. And I just remember for like most of the weekend we just played that, and we just had a really good time with it. And that for me was like the very first fighter that now this is to me though. I'm sure this has probably been done before, but as far as I know, this was the first game that I ever played that introduced a counter system.
There's probably been others beforehand, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know Weapon Lord, did certainly, introduce a counter and parry system, in there. Well, like not really a. No, yeah, I mean, it was kind of a parry system. It was just a unique way that you could block and then just leave your opponent open for an attack.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that more later. DOA 2, which again is another series that for some reason was not on the Wikipedia fighting game list, which is weird.
Like, what have they got against Soul Calibur and DOA?
Yeah, I don't know why. And what was always kind of funny to me, especially, was I remember later on around that same time when I saw a trailer for like Virtua Fighter 5 or something like that, where they had obviously changed up the gameplay, and made it a little bit faster, and I just couldn't help but notice how like characters now had more fluid and like connected hits and combos, as opposed to just punch, kick, roundhouse, or something like that. Because it just looked to me like, oh, they're kind of copying what DOA did. And then Brandon or like whoever it was said, well, actually DOA copied Virtua Fighter. It's like, well, that's not how DOA ever looked. The first time that I ever played it. I mean, it certainly didn't play like Virtua Fighter. It was certainly a little bit more fast paced than Virtua Fighter ever was. But I never played first DOA until like many years later, when I got my copy of DOA Ultimate.
Yeah.
So, it does certainly look, in terms of looks, it does look a lot like original Virtua Fighter, but it doesn't really play it, like that either. And on top of that, I will say, like, Ultimate DOA 2 is the more superb version. I mean, it looks better, it plays better, there are added moves, there are added levels, and, and the game is still, just as good and just as fast-paced, and, it's just an awesome game. Awesome. I love it. All right, you want to take one from your list?
Let's see. I couldn't remember the name of this, but I think it was like the Justice League thing from the original. Super Nintendo?
Justice League Task
Oh,
Force.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's kind of in the
That
kind of a category, but I thought I'd mention it anyway.
I remember I rented that, I think, once for a weekend. Like, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not very good either.
It's kind of in that meh category.
Yeah. Was that Konami who made that? Do you remember?
It was either Konami or Tecmo.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I could look it up, but I don't really want to have to do that.
Because you never know, it may not even be on there because of Wikipedia's spotty thing for some reason.
No, it was. In fact, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna look it up because it's easy enough. I just got to put in Wikipedia fighting game list, and thankfully it's all just alphabetized.
Oh, well, yeah,
so
that's handy.
let's see: B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Justice League Task Force. That was made by Blizzard.
Really?
Blizzard Entertainment. Let's see.
Doesn't seem like something Blizzard
published...
would make.
Okay, it was developed by Sunsoft.
Okay.
The Super Nintendo version from Blizzard Entertainment.
That makes more sense.
And it was published by Acclaim.
That makes more sense now.
Yeah. I know that it was very Street Fighter in its style. Certainly, I'm in move list. Mostly, I just remember I didn't like the way that it looked. It looked really kind of shitty, to be perfectly honest. And it was a little slow. It was a little clunky. This is obviously something that you're going to be hearing a lot, when we complain, about some of these old fighting games. The only, old classic fighting game that's really held up, which is kind of funny, is Street Fighter 2.
It's kind of weird.
Because if you've ever played original Street Fighter, and I remember for the longest time, hey, how come there's no Street Fighter 1? Well, there's a good reason.
Because there actually is a Street Fighter 1, and it's crap.
Well, I mean, okay, I never played original Street Fighter on the arcade, so I don't know. I mean, it was probably still not very good, because I'd never even played OG Street Fighter until, the Capcom, Arcade Collections Volume 2 came out, and they, put it on there. That game is dog shit! It is terrible! Now, I mean, it probably tried to model itself after Karate Champ, which did play in the same fashion, where it was slow and meant to be more realistic, in terms of a fighter, where it was, well, I mean, the only difference was that in a game like Karate Champ, you just had to get, one good hit, and you were good. Street Fighter, your character still had life bars, but the game was clunky in its controls and then in its movements, and trying to do special moves was virtually impossible. Because just trying to do something as simple as a fireball, character wouldn't do it at all. And these are complaints that you still hear about that game today, about original Street Fighter. That, as I understand it, when it later came to home consoles, it only came to, I think, TurboGrafx 16, which was a system that not a lot of people had, so the game went virtually unknown until, Capcom decided, hey, let's go ahead and make it part of our Capcom collection, and more people got to play it and experience, wow, this game's a piece of shit.
No wonder people don't know about this game.
Yeah. Oh, man, that game was garbage.
I mean, we never did mention the Street Fighter Alpha series.
Well, I mean, I figured, since we were, just talking about, the Street Fighter series, because, I only played Street Fighter Alpha 2. And yeah, I mean, I did own it and I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I kind of fell out of Street Fighter by like Street Fighter 2 Super or whatever. I mean, I did like the only other later one that I played was Super Street Fighter 4. That was the only other one that I played
Yeah.
later.
Me too.
You know,
I think I played like the third one a couple times in arcades, but that was about it.
yeah. I never played like any of the rest of the alphas. I never played Third Strike, or anything like that. Like I just stopped caring, about the Street Fighter series. I mean, it's still enjoyable, but after like so many iterations and add-ons and all this, it's like I got other things
as
to play.
soon as you get like the latest iteration, they come up with another one.
Mm-hmm. Which Capcom loves
Oh
doing.
yeah, and even now today, they still make you buy the other game.
Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, they have said that with Street Fighter V, that everything else, will just be DLC. So it's not going to be like, Street Fighter V Ultimate, Super Street Fighter V, or anything like that. That it'll all just be DLC. But I could really care less. I could give a shit about
me
Street
too.
Fighter.
Anyway, moving on.
I'll briefly mention Primal Rage. Which was a fun game, but it's pretty clunky.
Yeah.
A big one for me, at least one that's pretty deep down in my heart. I mean, I was never amazing at it, but I liked it, just because of like some of the things that it tried to do and just kind of how different it was, and that was Weapon Lord.
Oh, yeah. Me too. I don't think I got very good at it either, really, but I did play it and I did enjoy it.
Yeah. I just remember, when I, like the very first time that I ever heard about it, it was in, a magazine, and then them talking about how, how like they were kind of trying to do, a semi-realistic fighter where it was like, oh, like if you throw your weapons at each other at the same time, you like clang off of each other, and stuff like that, and how, there's, like a counter block system where basically like you hold down like X, or whatever, and then you press a direction, and then when your opponent attacks you, you can like parry their attack, and then you'll leave them open and stunned, for like a second, and then you can go in and just beat the shit out of them for it. I could never master it.
Nope, me neither. But they try.
And on top of that, like it had a pretty deep and pretty cool little story to it, too. And yeah, I mean, it had a short character roster of only maybe like 6 characters or so, but they were all pretty semi-unique, maybe not in terms of looks.
But they had semi-unique weapons
and
moves. And
yeah. And every character, as I understand it, had like a shit ton of different moves. Like characters would have a range of like 8 to 9 different special moves that you could do. Like I just remember like my favorite character, Core, who's he's kind of the main protagonist, of the game, where he had like several different like sword spin moves that you could do, where there'd be like this trail of fire, along with it, or a sword dive move, or a sword sweep, or a sword uppercut and stuff like that. And, and yeah, and I mean, I haven't played that game in a long time now. I would, love to try to play it again, at least, with somebody else. But I don't, sadly, have anybody else who I can really play that with. So that's kind of out of the question. And what was interesting was that I was reading about it on Wikipedia. Somebody, I guess, who originally helped make Weapon Lord, it's like Namco came out and said that, well, I mean, we don't really want to do another Weapon Lord because, well, I mean, it kind of, like, we already feel that that's kind of what the Soul Calibur series is, in that, that realistic fighting style. that we did, with Weapon Lord. Cause, as I understand it, a character from Soul Calibur, I forget the character's name. He actually had a skin, of the character of Bane from Weapon Lord, which is pretty cool. But one of the guys who made it, who I guess now runs a small studio, keeps on talking about how he would love to make another Weapon Lord. They just don't have the money for it.
Do a Kickstarter.
And to which I, yeah,
Do a Kickstarter,
to which I say,
dude.
dude, kickstart that shit. Like, hell, man, I would donate money, for a new Weapon Lord game. Hell yeah. I would love to play that shit.
Speaking of kind of unique things, we ought to mention Mace: The Dark Ages.
Oh, yeah, fuck, man. I didn't even have that game, actually even on my list.
Well, it's a good thing I did, so...
Shit. I completely forgot about that game. Yeah, yeah. I would say, though, not really clunky, but...
It was kind of in that
clunky,
in that middle age type... Middle age. That middle ground of 3D where they were experimenting with it, so, Yeah. But it had kind of a unique system to where it actually, gave you an ending regardless if you won or not.
Yeah, which was something that I really liked about that game.
Never beat the damn game, but,
pretty cool... Yeah. It had, a lot of really cool and interesting characters who all had, their own crazy backstories and then crazy endings to them. I'm not really sure who my favorite character was. There were, some good ones that I liked. I liked Lord Demos, who was a pretty cool character. I liked the Executioner. Al Rashid was a pretty badass character too. I know I own that game. I think it's out in my collection. I'm out in my garage because my collection just slowly grows these days.
Eventually, he's going to have to build on an addition to his grandmother's house to call his collection.
That could happen. That may very well happen. Or at some point, I'll just set up an extra room in the basement and just hook up all that shit together, and then just whenever I get nostalgic and want to play something,
go down in the basement,
go downstairs in the basement, and I can play it. Yeah. That was another one that I think just spur of the moment. I rented and I played, and I was like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. And so which just goes to show sometimes you can get lucky with a random rental. Sometimes, not always.
It happens.
Yeah. Okay, well, here's one that I know in the arcade seemed cool, but then when you played it on the console, it was kind of shitty, but Pit Fighter.
Oh, yeah.
That was still during the
kind of digitizing actors thing.
Characters. Yeah, which was cool for the time by today's standards. It just looks
it doesn't look right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as it could be, but the game. Again, it's probably just another one of those middle of the road. Like you mentioned earlier, with something like Justice League, or what was another game that I mentioned earlier that you said was meh to you? What was it?
Shit.
Primal Rage.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. That's probably another meh. Because it's not broken, it's not terrible, but another big one that I know you and I played quite a bit in the arcade every once in a while. If we, if during high school or something that gym teacher was like, hey, we're gonna go to the bowling alley, and then afterward, if you guys want to, you can play on the arcade. You and I would play Samurai Showdown.
Yeah.
Still love that game.
Yeah, that was another SNK thing.
SNK made a lot of really good shit.
The only problem is when they tried to they didn't do a whole lot of. There wasn't any for the Super Nintendo.
Well, that's because they really
Yeah. And then, like, later on, like, on the PlayStation, some of them were really kind of slow for loading.
Yeah. That's something that I understand about it.
Because SNK
SNK
did have, like, its own console, I think called, like, the Geo or something like that, or the Neo Geo or whatever.
Yeah, and their games cost like $100
yeah,
each.
And,
because
you know, the console was, like, something like $1,000 or something.
Yeah. Well, and that's because...
Basically, it was basically just a portable arcade.
Yeah, because that's exactly what the games were. It was that entire arcade experience just lodged onto a giant brick cartridge. Was what it was.
So
it was the arcade experience, and which is understandable why they would have to charge so much.
Yeah, but it was kind of at the same time it was kind of like
really
a rich person only type thing.
yeah, which is sad. Which is very sad because. Yeah. Samurai Shodown 2 was also a game that that had the whole like clang system,
where if you swung your weapons just right at each other, you would actually just bounce off each other.
Well, like I also remember there would be times where like you're you would sort of struggle for control at one point too. Like your blades would clash.
Oh yeah, you would weapon lock, and you'd struggle to see if you could disarm your opponent or if he would disarm you.
yeah, which was again a pretty unique system to it too. I don't know if any other fighter at the time had done that. Maybe, but
I don't think any of them have done that yet.
Well, I mean, this was still, I think, during, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat days. So, that was probably a fairly early, weapon fighter.
I think it might. I think the original Samurai Shodown might have even predated Weapon Lords.
Probably. I don't know if Weapon Lord ever had an arcade.
I don't know. I don't either.
So, it's don't judge me on that. And of course, feel free to correct. Let's go to another random one. There was, of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter games.
The two versions of it: the Super Nintendo version and the Sega Genesis version.
There was a third.
There was? What was the third one?
Yeah, on the Nintendo.
Oh yeah, on the original.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which I never played.
I didn't either.
I've heard it's okay. The worst one, and I actually played the Genesis version. The Genesis version is bad.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Really bad.
Even the story is just kind of, what the fuck?
Well, the story was just we made evil versions of the turtles. They and they captured Splinter, and now the turtles have to go to these other planets and fight these evil turtles and then rescue Splinter.
For some reason, April's there helping them, and now all of a sudden she can fight.
Yeah. Well, April and there were I think 2 or 3 other characters who were also playable, or who were also heroes.
Yeah, Casey Jones I think was one of them.
Yeah. And what was so bad about the Genesis version was because the Genesis version was so limited on its controls because it only had 3 buttons. And one of those buttons was a designated taunt. And then the other 2 buttons was a kick and a punch, and that was it.
Yeah.
And and one thing I've never liked about the Genesis is the sound quality of it. I still maintain that a lot of the sound quality on a lot of Genesis games is terrible.
Yep.
But from what I understand, that was mostly because when you had a Western game developer who didn't really know how the Genesis worked, and that was a lot of the time why sound quality was shit on there. So, that's understandable.
Eh.
But yeah, because I remember playing something like Genesis version of Mortal Kombat 2, and it sounded like dog shit. Like the music was, like all the music and the sound effects were garbled and everything. And like everything also kind of sounded like static at the same time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It was bad.
Yeah, it was just awful. Yeah, it was awful. Whereas the Super Nintendo version of Tournament Fighters was actually a pretty good game.
Mhm.
It was, very Street Fighter, obviously, just with the skin of turtles over it. And it had a pretty large, character roster. And, and it was just a good, fun game. Probably fairly middle of the road, but it wasn't bad or terrible or anything like that. So, not bad. One bad one, though, that I never played until maybe last year or so, and you should know this because we did a video on it.
Oh, yeah.
Shaq Fu. They're making a new one?
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. I kind of wonder why.
Because Shaq needs money.
I don't think Shaq needs money. I mean, he's probably pretty well off. But for some reason that game has fans and supporters, which makes me wonder why. I mean, did you actually play it? I mean, the game's not very good.
Kind of makes you...
I mean, I've played worse, but yeah, I mean, it just wasn't a very fun game. I mean, yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't. I would wonder though. Well, then again, I mean, you never played Shaq Fu.
No,
but
I didn't.
But let me ask you this: would you rather play Shaq Fu or Rise of the Robots?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. I just thought for a second, I'm like, oh, did he not hear me?
No, I heard you. I was thinking. Sorry.
Okay. That's all right.
Well, I'm going to lean with Shaq Fu just because I haven't played it.
Okay.
So I got no reference, really.
Right. Well, I'm pretty sure like after you play it, you'd be like, is neither an option?
That too.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, like, I would be lenient. All right. I'll briefly mention World Heroes game. Which, was very Street Fighter-esque. Was that SNK as well?
I believe so.
I think it was. Yeah. It was just an odd little fighter. It was, just because of its characters. Because a character like, oh God, what's his name?
Oh, Rasputin.
The like bad guy. Yeah. Thank you. Rasputin is a playable character in World Heroes. Apparently.
And he's gay.
And he wasn't gay. He was just weird. It was,
well, okay. Let me correct myself.
Poses.
He's the stereotypical gay. Let's just say.
I just chalk it up really to just like weird Japanese being like, hey, let's do this because Japanese is weird.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Where, and like if you've never played it, he has this sort of like pose, for like when he wins a match sometimes where he does the Marilyn Monroe thing where his skirt suddenly blows up and he tries to hold it down. It's like, ooh!
We say skirt, but it was really a robe. But yeah,
yeah.
You get the picture, and like whenever he would walk around, sometimes flowers would pop out of nowhere.
I don't remember that.
I think that was actually that was I think in like later editions of World Heroes because there was like four iterations of it.
Mm-hmm. I know that he had fairly odd moves. Like whenever you would throw a kick, his foot would glow and would grow like several sizes bigger, along with his hands. And that every single time he got hit, his eyes would like bug out of his head.
I think that one did have also
that.
have like a Nazi cyborg thing to it too, didn't it?
I don't remember. I think I only played that game a couple of times with our buddy Josh, who I think owned it or was renting it. I don't remember which. I know the game had I think it had a demonic football player in it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that game was just weird just for the sake of being weird.
And it had like a whole time traveling mechanic to it too.
Yeah. The one thing that was odd or like maybe unnecessary was like every time you knock down your opponent, the ref would come in and start counting to 3.
Yeah.
You know, like it was a sudden wrestling match.
Wait, what?
Which, yeah, I mean, I would just wonder why.
Maybe they were trying to Japan, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, fuck. I mean, I don't know. You know, like what? Like, were they trying to be very different? And
they were just they decided to throw in a random referee just for the hell of it.
I guess. All right. What's another one from your list, buddy?
Let's see. Let's see. We've mentioned Virtual Fighter. We've mentioned. Oh, we haven't mentioned Marvel vs. Capcom, but yeah, we kind of covered that with the Street Fighter thing.
Well, I was just going to cover them over, you know, the entire, Marvel Capcom games, basically. You know, because it started originally with an X-Men game.
Oh yeah, with the X-Men versus Street Fighter and.
Yeah, well, because originally there was X-Men: Children of the Atom.
Yeah, and then there was like Marvel
just
Heroes.
X-Men characters.
Something for the Power Stones, and then they did X-Men versus Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Then they did Marvel Heroes versus Street Fighter.
Marvel versus Capcom.
Marvel versus Capcom.
Yep.
Then Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and then
Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and now 3. Yeah. Which, you know, I'm just gonna say 2 was as good as it got.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, they kind of hooked us a little with 3 by promising like, oh, there's going to be like this story and
which there wasn't.
And then when the game finally comes, like, throw it out, don't need it. Yeah, Angry Joe kind of covered it.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it wasn't just that. It was just that the game had a lot of features that didn't work and just weren't there. Like it was an online system that just wasn't very good.
Wasn't it like buggy
did
and
not work?
If you could like find somebody to like have a match with, one side was a bit like glitchy and the other side wouldn't.
From what I understand, yes. That's kind of how it was. I don't play online or anything like that because I don't need to get my ass kicked.
Even if I did have the internet, I probably wouldn't either. I don't feel like getting my butt kicked by a racist, foul-mouthed 12-year-old.
Yeah. It also just especially did not help that later on, like 6 months later, I believe, that there was...
Oh, yeah, the Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Capcom 3. And it was a completely separate title. Now, and I mean, we talked about this before on another episode. Yeah. You know, so we'll keep this short. It was, you know, it was the sort of thing that made me glad that I never originally bought Marvel vs. Capcom 3. You know, because I rented it, you know, because I did have quite a bit of interest in playing it and, you know, being a Marvel vs. Capcom fan. And when I played it, it just felt like there wasn't as much as there was with 2. You know, because with 2, there were...
Yeah, there was like there were more characters.
There was, I think, in contrast from 2 to 3, there was maybe like 6 more characters, I think, in 2 as compared to 3.
And they got rid of some of the favorites from 2, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I don't like the way 3 looks. I don't. I don't like the way the characters look. I don't like the way everything looks. I don't. I just, and and obviously, yeah. It's a fondness of nostalgia, for that old pixel art. Because that always just looks better to me.
That's because you're an old man like me, Jordan.
Yeah,
We're
true,
old and cranky. Back in our days, we had with 8-bit graphics, and we liked it. We loved it.
We loved it. Though, well, and to be honest, it's not, just that, old pixel art like that is stupid. Like, no, like there are, a lot of, indie games that are very popular that are, utilizing the whole, 16 to 8-bit
pixel art,
pixel graphics, and people love it.
It can be done well if you take the time to actually do it. It's just, unfortunately, most people don't like to take the time to actually do it anymore.
Well, and, if you want, your game to look more modern or anything like that, like, I don't know, the logistics of it, so we're not going to get into that.
We'll move on.
Yeah. And I mean, I did buy the ultimate, edition of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, because I do, certainly enjoy the series. 3 is probably the most seizure-inducing because it just gets so fast and frenetic and just ridiculous.
And then they had the easy thing to where you could hit a button and pull off a combo.
Yeah. Well. I mean, they always had that in there. They always had that. All right. So moving on. There is, of course, Guilty Gear series.
Yeah, which I never played. So.
I only played, I believe it was, because I still own it. It's, I think, Guilty Gear XD or something like that. Which my buddy Brandon and I were actually introduced to it when I went to an anime convention that they had invited me to, several years ago. And they, had a gaming room in there where they had fighting games and dance games and stuff like that. And Brandon and I sat down and played this game that I'd never heard of, but it was a fighting game, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really cool, and yeah, still, a very good game. Did you know that for the first, the very first, Guilty Gear game, one guy made that whole thing?
No, I did not.
He wrote and coded the whole game and made all the music for it for the very first one, which is pretty goddamn impressive. So, all right. So, what's another one that you got on your list? Because I got maybe one or two more.
Actually, I think I'm pretty much done with my list, really.
Okay. Well, then let's briefly talk about Dragon Ball Z Budokai.
Ah, yeah.
Because I only played, and I still don't remember which one it was. It was probably 2 or maybe 3.
You're probably thinking of the first one.
Probably. I mean...
Because the first one was
honest,
kind of crap. Second one was a man. The third one was actually good.
Okay. Because I know that one, the 4 of us played a lot. Played quite a bit of it and got pretty good at it and had a shit ton of fun with it. But we only played it while you were here visiting.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But we still had quite a bit of fun out of it. Was that also about the same time that we did the multi-tap, Halo stuff too?
I think so.
You were here? Yeah, that was a shit ton of fun too. I mean, not a whole lot to say on it. I mean, I did briefly watch a bit of Dragon Ball Z, but I couldn't really get into it. Just because it just got too ridiculous and too stupid for me.
Yeah.
The game, though, was at least a lot of fun.
Well, that's just kind of it. The series itself is kind of weird because it's kind of got a really slow pace to it. But the movies are kind of good, and so are the games, because the pace is much faster. But,
yeah. Well, because what would always annoy me about the show is how long a fight would just go
Yeah.
on and on. And
they're
wow,
talking
this
in
is
the
just
middle of it
obnoxious.
while they're fighting.
Yeah, well, that's because they have to explain, like, oh, what's this move that he's doing? It's, oh, well, it's this. So, allow me to explain it to you. And they have to explain how the power works, and then he has to power it up, use it. It hits him, but it doesn't do what it's expected to do, or it misses, or something like that, which is just like, fuck you, I don't even care anymore.
I will use my ultimate technique that'll give me 3 episodes to complete. And then he misses.
Oh, it missed.
It's like, or it didn't kill him. He pops up after he uses it, it's like, oh, it's finally over, and then he pops up 2 seconds later and kills one guy, and
yeah. Oh no, it's not over yet. Oh god, I don't fucking care. I remember that happened with the whole spirit bomb thing, and I just remember being like, this is fucking stupid.
We apologize to all you Dragon Ball Z fans out there, but this is just our opinion.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it's just, I hate that crap. I hate it. It's just ridiculous.
Send your hate mail to him.
Whatever. Bring it on, you fucking nerds. No. I'm kidding. If you love Dragon Ball Z, that's perfectly fine.
It's just not our cup of tea. I do enjoy the movies, but that's about it.
Yeah, I've never actually watched the movies or anything like that.
Maybe next time you guys.
All right, well, I got 2 more.
No, anyway.
Well, who knows? We'll see. Okay, I got 2 more here. One is one that I actually did a video on a while ago, and that, of course, is Battle High San Bruno, or as it's known on the title screen, the Elemental Revolt, which is it's a throwback 2D 16-bit style, arcade, style fighter, but it's fairly modern, in what it tries to do, where it has the typical training sessions and stuff like that. I don't think it has online though. I think, if I remember correctly, I haven't played it in a while. And again, that was just a game that I just played on a whim, for my Let's Play series, and just found that, wow, this is actually a pretty good, solid little fighter, and on top of that, it was only $1. So
can't go wrong with $1. Although sometimes you can.
Yeah. And then we come to the last one, which I know I told you about, and this is another one that's right up there as one of the worst fighters I've ever played.
Are you talking about the Sonic one? Oh.
No. Though I could have mentioned that one, but yeah, that one's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as this, and that's Steel Rivals. This was another indie title that, again, I did a Let's Play on. This game was about $7. It was, it's on the Wii U, it's also on Steam, and on Steam it has a lot of negative reviews on it. This game is crap. This game is really bad. I mean, anything bad that you could possibly think of for a fighter, like worse than Shaq Fu, worse than Rise of the Robots. The only bad thing, that would be considered worse about Rise of the Robots is that when you do a versus mode, you have to play as the protagonist if you're player 1. Whereas, in this one, at least it was cheaper. You do have a larger character roster, but while there is a training mode, the game doesn't really teach you how to play it. There is no proper move list or anything like that. The game uses 3D character modeling, but it's still on a 2D plane that you fight on, so why are the characters even 3D models? The game is slow. It's clunky. There's no story. And there's no real characterization. There's not a lot of music. The game looks okay, but it kind of plays like dog shit. I think there's online, but nobody's really playing it.
Gee, I wonder why.
Hell, even when I did single player, all that happens is you play a match against a selected character that you choose, and then whether you win or lose, you can either choose to go back to the main menu or replay that same fight. There is a tournament mode, and I was actually shocked and surprised that when I lost, I still continued on in the tournament.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
That's not how tournaments work.
No, and like the fact that there was there's like, I think if I remember correctly, there's like 14 or 15 or so characters, which is a pretty large roster.
Mm-hmm.
And they all look and play fairly different. It's a semi-weapon fighter, like kind of like, think like Soul Calibur, kind of, right? Like hell, like they even had like 2 characters that are beast characters. Like you had a Minotaur and a Lizard Man in there. Hell, you had a Kung Fu fighter.
Well, of course.
But
every fighter.
And the jumps in this game are just as floaty as they were in a game like Virtua Fighter, like 20 years ago.
You mean where you'd like hang time in air for like several seconds?
Yes. And, what's hilarious to me is that, again, like going back to the training sessions. Okay, so you know how in a typical good fighting game, how if you go into a training session, you can program the computer, to just stand there and take your punishment, or you can actually program them to actually fight back or anything like that. And then you can bring up a move list or anything like that. In the training session for Steel Rivals, the computer will fight and can kill you. But so can you. You can get a win out of training session.
That's ridiculous.
And on top of that, this is a modern game. This game came out like last year. And it only uses 2 buttons. It has like a normal typical swing with your weapon and then a slight melee kick or something like that, and then that's it. Just 2 buttons.
Pretty much a kick or use your weapon. And you probably never use the kick.
Well, you could. There are some different varying attacks, depending on ways on how, you like move your controller around or anything like that. Maybe they were trying to go for fairly realistic. I don't know, but they really didn't pull it off. And what surprises me, especially about this game, I brought this up, during the Let's Play of it, was how I was kind of confused as to, because you would think, that for a game like this, that, okay, it doesn't play very well or anything like that, like, it's not excessively violent either. Like, there's no blood or anything like that for, like, when you hit an opponent, which you'd think, like, well, maybe they would try to sell the game also based on its violence. No, it can't even sell on that.
Shit.
I don't really even know if I can say Steel Rivals is the worst fighting game I've ever played. I know it's bad.
It's up there.
I know that. Yeah. It is certainly up there because I'm sure there are other worse fighters out there that I've also played. Now, there was a game called Dragoon that I did a Let's Play on. I'm another indie fighter. That was probably worse than Steel Rivals because that character roster only had 1 character. But that game only cost me $1. So Steel Rivals actually cost me 6 more. Rise of the Robots, when I got it, only cost me maybe a couple of bucks. Because everybody knows that game is garbage. Probably the same with Shaq Fu. I don't know if I really could narrow it down as to what was the worst fighting game possible. I really don't know. I'm sure somebody out there could. But this is certainly an example of, a game made, like, only a year ago and got everything possible wrong about a fighting game. And it's just, how do you manage to do that?
Apparently they did.
How? I mean, it's kind of, like the equivalent of, like, how do you make a bad game today? Like, how do you make a game that controls like garbage and is not fun?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Especially with everything that we've learned. But, who knows? Who really knows? There was another game that I left off of here that I realized, because I figured, well, we would just be going for, just pure nostalgia. And it does certainly play into what I was kind of saying during my Let's Play about Steel Rivals, was that maybe they were going for minimalism in their fighting for it. In the fact that it was a game that only used 2 buttons for it. Well, there's another game that does the same thing. And that game is Dive Kick, which, again, was another indie title where it works on the plane that, that you can't really move your character unless you're diving and kicking, because those are the only 2 buttons that you have is, your jump and then your kick. That's it. And the game is, I think, quite brilliant in what it tries to do with its type of fighting, where you and your opponent can only take 1 hit. And because you can't really move unless you're jumping and diving, so it's all about, you just trying to outmaneuver your opponent. Waiting for them to make that first move, screw up, and then hit them. That's actually quite smart.
And them doing the same thing to you.
Yeah. Now, I mean, a lot of people, I understand, kind of shit on Dive Kick, because it's, I guess, fairly hipstery, because it's like, oh, hey, we're kind of making fun of, fighting games, because it's also very much a parody of fighting games, where, it's got, those stereotypical fighting game characters in it, where it's like, hey, like, here's the Rue character, and hey, here's the token black stereotype, and hey, and like, here's the weird, Japanese character who's weird, like, just for the sake of being weird, and stuff like that.
And comes out there in a kabuki mask and plays with dolls.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. But, like, I think the game is brilliant just based on its gameplay alone.
Well, and there's nothing weird with doing something kind of as a parody of that, if you do it correctly. But you gotta get the gameplay right.
Yeah, which I think this game did very well. All right, well, everybody, I think we're going to wrap that up. Anyway, I hope that you guys have enjoyed our nostalgia, nerdy talk about at least our look on the fighting game history. Actually, why don't you let us know, like, what are some of your fighting, or like, what are some of your favorite fighting games? In fact, Andy, what would you probably say, if you could, is your favorite fighting game?
It would have to be a toss-up between Soul Calibur and probably the remake of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good. I do always find myself going back, to like classic, Street Fighter 2. Marvel vs. Capcom is certainly up there. Soul Calibur 2, of course, is up there as well. But, hell, like, you give me, anything, that I grew up with and that have fond, nostalgia for, especially something I can sit down and still play today and like, yeah, this is still pretty good. It still holds up. Yeah, that is absolutely perfect. All right, so everybody, hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you did enjoy this. You can find me on Twitter at JMR2709. We hope that you've enjoyed. Till next time, we're the other people.
Good night.
Ciao.